Hello and welcome to the Blue Monday podcast, close season episode number 4 on top of 4 season review shows. So we have put the legwork in, and a man who has put the legwork in, safely back from Russia after being held hostage by the KGB. Joe Fairs, how you doing, Joe?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Ben. After my examination by the KGB.
How's your butthole? It's not going to respond to that. Joe, you're wearing yellow.
It is an Ipswich Town goalkeeper shirt in recognition of Bartosz Białkowski signing his contract today. It should be accepted.
He is top of my list, but we just need to call David Diamond out. I've just spoken to David Diamond on the phone, who was booked on this podcast. He's on holiday in the southwest somewhere. You go into your cottage and you book a week's internet, which he booked. It's run out and the person in reception's knocked off for the day. So David Diamond has got no internet. I know his feelings on some things. And Mikey Penty Smith is in some rap party in Russia somewhere with some French people or something. So he's swanning it. So Joe, you've got all the glory. Statman's probably in the stat cave concocting something or other. So you've got all the glory. But you've already mentioned Bartosz Białkowski. He went to the World Cup, had some time off. His agent told Birmingham he hadn't signed a deal yet. They made a couple of bids for him, and we've signed him to a 3-year deal, the kind of standard Marcus Evans deal, with a 1-year option at the end of the deal. The Sun, the hugely reliable Sun, reported that it was going to be 20 grand a week, and a few of us raised some eyebrows. TWTD refutes this completely, but apparently it's more than David McGoldrick was getting, and he will be the top paid player there. Talk to me about the sign, and talk to me, has this got extra significance, bearing in mind we're used to having the best players sold? Talk to me about the signing and the kind of wider context of Evans actually doing this.
I think it's a really good bit of news for Ipswich Town fans to have Bart signed up for another 3 years. He's 31 now, so he's going into sort of the latter end of his career, and we're not just sort of getting rid or cashing in when there's decent money on the table, it seems. Marcus Evans has come out and made a statement about it, and he seems to be more visible with it, and it's a real show of intent and a real good bit of backing for both the club and Paul Hurst.
Do you not think, to play devil's advocate, is there a sense of, well, Evans can't really lose because if he spends the money, he can still sell next year for a bigger profit? Or do you think his intentions are genuinely long term for the betterment of the team?
You obviously have to look after your assets. You have to protect the assets and keep them on long contracts. And Bart only had 1 year to run. But like I say, if it is anywhere near that 20,000, if it's 15,000, you're still talking sort of the best part of a £2.5 million investment into him. So whilst it does protect him, I don't expect him to leave this summer now unless there's a silly offer come in.
No. Moving on, first friendly for Paul Hurst at the weekend, losing 2-0 to Braintree. Hurst said, "We should be able to come here and put on a better performance and win the game realistically. Credit to Braintree. I thought they did very well and certainly deserved the win. But I'm the Ipswich Town manager and I'm looking at my team and expecting a lot better." What is Hurst after in these friendlies, and is he posturing with those comments, or is there kind of some deeper significance to them?
He did sound very disappointed in the style of play as much as anything, where he wants to have us playing from the back, playing through the thirds. And I didn't go to the game, but it sounds as though we were struggling to get on the ball. Players weren't demanding the ball until Andre Dazelle came on in the second half. And whilst he did say there hasn't been much work done on tactical shape, it's mostly been fitness so far, I think he did expect better than what he's received. And that probably plays back to the fact that under Mick last year, these players have been drilled to not play for the ball. Cole Skuse has been drilled to not go and pick the ball up short. The fullbacks have been drilled to knock the ball long first time. That we haven't been drilled to play the ball out from the back. So it's going to be a learning curve, and there's going to be mistakes made. But I do think when you looked at the team and when you looked at the bench, I know we're still missing a few players through injury, there is a real lack of depth in that squad. We're still 4 to 5 first teamers away from where we need to be.
When do you think you'll start to see the kind of Hurst print? Do you know what I mean? Start to have an impact.
Well, it's going to take a number of sort of competitive games. I'm sure there'll be signs in some games, but it'll be a case of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I'm sure, where you look like you're playing well, you have some good games, you do that, and then all of a sudden it won't click for a couple of games. And we're not just going to start the season looking like a Paul Hurst team and play like that for 46 games until the end of the year.
No, absolutely. Joe, I've already mentioned it. You've been over to the World Cup. France won. It's all over. England came fourth. You were at the semi-final. So give me your thoughts on your experience of Russia and probably the biggest game you've ever seen in your life, and the wider implications, how you think England did, and how important it is that people actually care about them again, and how beloved they were in the country.
I thought the whole atmosphere was brilliant over in Russia. I obviously experienced it for only a few hours because my flight times weren't the best. So I was due to land at 5 p.m. ahead of the 9 o'clock kickoff. We stacked over Moscow airport for an hour, so we didn't actually hit the deck till 6 p.m. So it was a real rush to get to the game. And after effectively like 16 hours travelling, we got to the game at sort of half an hour, 45 minutes before the game kicked off. But after the game, we took a while to take in the city. We wandered up to Red Square and had a look round, and it was just a brilliant atmosphere. The volunteers working there. It was very like if any of the listeners went to London 2012, where the whole city just seemed in really good spirit. And from the people we spoke out there and the people you hear on the radio talking about it, the Russians have done a fantastic job of hosting it, and it was a brilliant tournament. Unfortunately, England didn't get there because at half time in that game, that game looked there for the winning, looked there for the taking, really. We could have been 2 or 3-0 up at the time, but they came out and made changes in the second half, and we didn't react to them, or we reacted too slowly, which I'd be loath to criticise Southgate too heavily, because he effectively set the team up, which should have been 3-0 up at half time had Kane and Lingard put those sort of relatively easy chances away. But he didn't react quick enough. But the players are young and inexperienced and learning, and he's a manager doing exactly the same. So I think we'll be stronger for the tournament. It's important that the country is behind the football team, and it was brilliant how they were. It seemed that they sort of rediscovered that spirit of not being big time players, the social media interaction with the squad, and you sort of felt like you got to know the personalities of the team, and they didn't seem a real sort of I am attitude. It was a real team ethic there. So fingers crossed we continue to do well and everyone learns from this and we get some more players coming through and go from there.
It's like they've kind of just got over the first generation of money coming to the Premier League and, like you say, big time, rich, wealthy, famous England players, and it's kind of like they're over it now, because the amount of times Dave said to me, "Oh, are you watching England on the pod?" and I'm like, nah, don't care really, and not bothered. Just only watch Ipswich. But I think I'm pretty much back invested in it now, and I think there's probably a lot of casual England fans like me who are back on a train now.
Well, that's good to hear. I've always watched it. I used to travel around Europe watching England sort of everywhere they went for a number of years, but that's obviously been curtailed in the last few years, and the sort of results and the performances were sort of part of the reason behind that. It wasn't just sort of settling down and getting older. And you hear the players from that era talking now, the Ferdinands, Lampards, how they couldn't put their club rivalries aside when they actually met up on England duty, and that's what it looked like from the fans. Like I said, I went to Moscow 11 years ago in 2007, and we lost 2-1, and there's 3,000 England fans there singing the whole game, and not one player came over at the end of the game to clap the fans. I think, bloody hell, we've come a long way. We've all spent a lot of money here. It's bad enough if Ipswich don't do it when you're at sort of a northern game away, let alone in Moscow when you've got visas and huge expense to get there. But there seemed a real good spirit, and hopefully, like I say, fingers crossed that continues.
Yeah, looks good for the Euros going forward anyway. We haven't spoken to you since, so we'll do a little bit on Adam Webster. So he left, I guess 2 weeks ago now, wasn't it? 3.5 million guarantee with a potential upside of 8 million if he hits all the targets in the contract. Just give me a bit on the player, the fee, the timing, and the impact that domino going down may have had on other things.
Well, my first reaction was disappointment because he's a player that I really rate that I don't think we ever got to see the best of. There were times when he was really starting to look good and he picked up an injury, and once he came back, it then took him a little while to get going again. But at his best, when we saw him playing well, he really was an outstanding defender and good on the ball, and he sounded exactly the sort of player that Paul Hurst would want. But we're never going to see that. I can understand why the club have sold him, why both Hurst and Evans agreed to deal. 3.5 million is decent money for what is effectively an injury-prone centre-half who hasn't put together more than 20 games in the season for us. So if you can get a more sort of a player who is going to be fit, who is going to play more, he might not be of the same level, but ultimately, what will Ipswich do without Adam Webster? Well, we've been doing it for the last sort of year or two, but I do feel he is a player that if he puts a full season together, he could be worth treble what we've sold him for. But we'd have to hope he is, and we can cash in on the sort of performance-related pay, performance bonuses, and any sell-on fee if he can put it together at Bristol City.
Well, you're right. If he doesn't put it together, then they've cashed it in at the right time, and if he does, then I know you're saying the fee could be way, way higher, but we'll still collect some money. I think a lot of the sense from the fans was that the lesser of three evils, Waghorn, Webster, or Bart. I think the one that most people would have sold got sold.
Yeah, I personally, I wouldn't have. I'm really glad that Bart has stayed, but I wasn't actually that worried about him staying, in that I think he's earned the opportunity to move to a bigger club. And if a Premiership club was going to come into him, I don't want it to stand in his way. And he sort of earned the move, where Webster hasn't really earned the move yet. And I felt there's more to see from him. But when it was Bart linked with Birmingham, that was a bit, oh God, if he ends up going there, that would be ridiculous. But
this was agent,
it's all worked out.
This was agent stuff, though, wasn't it? Just to bring the contract to a close, don't you think?
I don't know. I think that there's probably an element of that. There's probably an element of agents, but Birmingham the club have said we have rejected bids for Bart, which you can only presume was the Birmingham bid. So they did have a sort of £3 million or thereabouts sitting on the table ready to take.
They pay well as well. The guy from Brentford, Jota, he's on a very high wage for Championship there.
Well,
so.
David Stockdale is there as well, isn't he? And I've heard he's on sort of he left Brighton after they'd been promoted to go there, and I don't think Brighton wanted him to go, so he's got to be on 30-40 grand a week, which is a hell of a lot more than anyone at Ipswich is going to be earning.
Absolutely. Right, this is one where people will be really interested to get your thoughts. So Dylan Crowe has now been linked with this whole list of Champions League clubs, basically. A couple of weeks ago as well, I think like the day before or the day after Webster went, Ben Knight went off to Man City. A lot of people up in arms. You develop a player and he gets pinched from you. Can you explain to people what the rules are? Are they right to be pissed off? And could Ipswich have acted in any different way, or are the rules against them?
I don't think the rules are against Ipswich so much as they are just generally in football. It is a case that if a big club comes along and wants one of your players, whether they're a first team or a youth team player, and the player wants to go, there's very little you can do to stop them. Like obviously Man City have taken Ben Knight from us, but Man City have also lost Bobby Duncan, who was an England under-17 striker who's got a hat-trick against Brazil recently. They lose him to Liverpool. Liverpool have lost a player there. Spurs lose a player to PSV. Nottingham Forest lose a player to RB Leipzig. Players will move at a young age, and it's just a case of making sure you get the sort of the best fee that you can for them. We'd done all we can to help Ben Knight. I'm sure he had more investment than any player probably in the history of the academy in him, from what I hear with regards to nutritionists and personal trainers and everything we can do for him. But ultimately, the club have to try and keep the player happy, and we did do that for as long as we could. But now that offer from Man City, which has probably been 4 or 5 years in the making, they've been after him. It's got to a stage where it's too good for the parents to turn down, too good for the player to turn down, and the club may have wanted to turn it down, but ultimately, you can't keep an unhappy player here. There's also the complication now that a lot of young boys go abroad, so not only do you lose the fee, you still lose the player, but they're happy to go to places. There was talk of Monaco after Ben Knight, and had he gone there, we'd have got next to nothing for him. So the club has to play the game, but ultimately the players have the power.
Why were people so annoyed? And what is Ben Knight's chance of even playing a first team game for Man City?
Well, ultimately, probably at the moment, playing a first team game for Man City for any youth player is a very slim chance. But he is probably one of the 2 or 3 highly rated player in his age group. He is every club in the world would have been aware of him and his talents and the way he plays. And without sort of trying to sound over the top, when you watch him play, the player you compare him to is Lionel Messi. I'm not saying he's anywhere near in that class or will go on to have anywhere near the career Messi has, but just the style of play has that little diminutive left-footed player, pace on the ball, accelerates when he gets the ball and drifts past men easily, great range of passing, can go on both feet and shoot, and he is a fantastic prospect. And ultimately, it's a shame we won't ever get to see him playing the first team at Ipswich, but he's got as good a chance as anyone in that academy to make it through.
And just the other part of the question: why were people so up in arms? Is it perhaps a little bit of a lack of understanding of what's actually gone into it and how the hands are tied?
I don't think it's that. I think it is generally annoying to lose a player before you've seen the best of them, and people generally only look at things sort of from an Ipswich perspective of when the players leave. Oh, we're losing Ben Knight to Man City. Marcelo Flores has been linked with Arsenal. But on the flip side, we take players from below us in the pyramid. We took a boy from Grays last season, Kai Brown, who was playing for their first team, played 30 games for their first team last year, and he's come to Ipswich, and all we've given back is a pre-season friendly for our under 23s to go and play their first team. And whilst it's obviously a different level and people will make excuses, Grays cannot hold on to a player when sort of championship clubs are sniffing around them in the same way that Ipswich can't keep hold of a player when Champions League clubs are sniffing around them. You just have to try your best to keep them happy, but once they aren't happy and once they want to go, they're going to go.
And as if by magic, the perfect segue, a player who plays a level below Ipswich is Gwion Edwards, Peterborough winger. According to Twitter happy Dara McAntony, who's quite a good laugh on there, the deal's virtually done. They've said their goodbyes, 700,000, and I suppose it goes into what you're saying, that for every Ipswich player that gets pinched by a club above them, there's a Peterborough player that Ipswich can pinch. What do you think about this signing, if and when it goes through? Pacey, dribbler, youngish, hungry-ish. Reminds me of signing Jermaine Wright and John McGreal and people like that.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of him, bar highlight reels, and any highlight reel of a winger is generally going to look quite good because it shows you when they're beating their man.
Salinas, yeah.
Yeah, smashing goals in, putting brilliant crosses in. But from sort of what I've read from the Peterborough fans on Twitter and on their forums, a lot of them rated him as their best player last season, and that's bearing in mind you've got Jack Marriott there who scored 30 goals and is going to be sort of linked with £6 million moves, and a lot of them are more gutted about losing Edwards than they will be about losing Marriott. So that's obviously a really promising sign. Also, couple that with the fact that Paul Hurst has played against him probably 4 times over the last 2 seasons, and possibly more if they've met in cups. I don't know if they have. So he knows this player very well. He's obviously caused the Shrewsbury side problems over the last couple of years. So I'm sort of really pleased that this one is getting over the line, and looking forward to see what Hurst can do with him.
Absolutely. Right, that's enough of the script, Joe. I put the call out for questions, and I'm going to open Pandora's shitbox here because there's a lot of questions. So we'll try and get through all of them. These are all on Twitter. If you want to get questions in, follow at Blue Monday ITFC. We'll always put tweet out and try and read as many as possible. First come, first serve. This is Harvey. Joe says, what do you make of Marcus Evans becoming more public with his speaking now, Webster transfer and Bart? You think this will become a regular thing?
Well, it seems to be becoming a regular thing since his interview. He obviously, as Harvey said, Webster and Bart, and that did surprise me that the Bart story was Evans' comments on it, not Paul Hurst. And I'm pleased to see Evans getting more involved because I think it was long overdue with the interview. Too often the senior voice either was the previous manager who acted as a lightning rod for all criticism, or Ian Milne, who just said, that's Marcus's department. I can't deal with that to do. So sometimes it's nice to hear from the organ grinder rather than the monkey.
I'm sorry. I love Ian Milne. I think you could give Ian Milne the most unassailable position in an argument, and he still wouldn't lose, would he? He'd just go, oh, well, he'd talk his way around it somehow. Bless him. This is George. What formation do you want to see Ipswich play under Hurst?
Well, I personally always like just the 4-2-3-1, which is a sort of general formation. I think that gives you the right balance of players in the right positions, as long as you can get the two at the back actually getting up and down the pitch. But it sounds as though it's going to be more of a 4-1-4-1 than that. But a cross between a 4-1-4-1, 4-2-3-1. But ultimately, that 4-4-2, they're all much the same. It's just
they're
about
very
the player
close.
roles.
Yeah, they're very close, aren't they? That's the good thing about the 4-2-3-1. You shove the two wide players forward and it's 4-3-3. You drop the 10 back and it's it's very close to 4-4-2. It's all much of a muchness, isn't it? But it's going to be very, very interesting. This is Scott. Do you think we can attract Mbappe this summer? You could probably answer that in one word, Joe.
No.
This is Casanova Crow. What areas do you think we still need to sort out? You said 4 or 5 players earlier in the pod. And speculate who is surplus to requirements after Hurst's comments. So where do we need to sort out, and who's in trouble here?
Okay, I think the first area we need to sort out is two centre backs. We've only really got one at the moment in Luke Chambers. Trevor Shalabar can play there, but I don't know whether he's going to be trusted to play a centre back. And I don't think you can go into the season expecting a 18-year-old who's never played a senior game to be able to play week in, week out in the Championship. So I'd say 2 centre backs. I think you need
Joe,
another.
Sorry to cut you off. Are you not having Knudsen or Spence as a centre back?
No, because I think they're needed in the full-back positions. I think would be too weak if we left those empty effectively. If you had at right back Josh Emmanuel and Barry Cotter, neither of them I don't think will convince me that they're going to be ready to start. And at left back just Miles Kenlock. I don't think you can. I think you're going to need 8 defenders to cover the positions over the season, and we're not anywhere close to that at the moment. I also am not convinced that Spence and Emmanuel are good enough at right back, or Barry Cotter. But I think that would need to be a case of one out, one in there. I think we need another striker because we've only got effectively Waghorn and Garner. Sears potentially, but he may play wide. Ideally, an experienced head in the centre midfield. I know we've got a lot of numbers there, but have we got any players that can put together a full season and at least another wide player? Wow. And a third choice keeper.
Who's going to be in trouble?
Potentially Jordan Spence. I don't think he's. I don't mind him, but I think he struggles quite often when he gets on the ball, and if he's got to play it out from the back, I'm not sure he'll be capable of doing that in her system. It wouldn't surprise me to see Josh Emmanuel or Miles Kenlock go out on loan again. So I don't think either of them are going to be, especially Miles. I don't think he's going to be cut out for a system where you've got to be super fit, because he just doesn't ever look it to me. People talk about Chambers and Scoots, but I think both of those will be good enough to adapt to it. And then there's just the potential of either Grant Ward or Freddie Sears don't find themselves a role within her system. Are either of them good enough out wide to score enough goals from there? Possibly. Are either of them good enough in central midfield or up front? No, I'd say. And then there's also the talk about Joe Garner trying to get closer to home. But so they're the ones I'd be concerned about leaving.
Interesting. This is Dylan. What do you think about interest in Spence from Hull? Can't remember where I read it. Would you prefer Garner or Sears alongside Waghorn? Well, from what you say, no one's going to be alongside anyone up front. And at Braintree, Waghorn was in the 10 position, which we shouldn't be too alarmed about because Vidra top scored the whole championship from Derby playing 10 in a 4-2-3-1. It's just whether that's a waste of Waghorn, and also you stick Garner up there, and how different is this going to be to a lot of last season? Anyway, Spence interest from Hull.
I'd be surprised if he got another club in the Championship. Personally, I think if he were to go, he'd end up lower down the leagues.
And if it was a two, I don't think it's going to be a front two. Garner or Sears alongside Waghorn.
I'd probably say neither. Really, I don't think Garner and Waghorn were a very particularly effective partnership. I don't think they work together because I think they both want to play in each other's space, and I'm not really convinced that Freddie Sears is cut out to be a striker at this level. I don't think he's got enough to his game.
Ian, what position do you think we need to fill? I think you've answered that one. Justin Crane, is Bobby Robson more than a manager the best film of the year and worthy of an Oscar? Well, I don't think it's going to win an Oscar, but have you seen it, Joe?
I have seen it. Yeah, it was very good.
Yep, fantastic. I saw a press screening of it a month before anybody else, and then wasn't allowed to say anything about it, which is one of the most pointless exercises you'll see. How long do you think it will take Paul Hurst to get the squad playing in his image?
I think it's going to take most of this season, is because this transfer window is so short with the World Cup going like that, and he's going to have this, and then January there's traditionally not much value, and we don't do much value there. So I think it could easily be getting towards sort of the end of the season, going into the following one where we can really have his squad sorted out. We're not in League One. We're not in League One like Shrewsbury, where you can't just chop and change a whole squad because the players are on too much money and are too secured contracts.
Nick, I'm curious about how the defence will line up. So are you, Joe, by the sounds of it. Thoughts on another striker would be interesting. It'd be nice to see answers to those issues, which I'm aware you don't have. It's going to be a back four, and Chambers is definitely going to play. We're not sure whether, like you say, Chalobah is going to be holding midfielder. I think I'm a bit higher on Kenlock than you are, Joe. I think I'd give him the go. It just depends whether whether Knudsen actually stays or whether he's wanting to go. What's the back four in the first game then?
Assuming Knudsen stays, it would be, well, I suppose Jordan Spence at right back, Luke Chambers centre back, alongside a new signing with Jonas Knudsen left back.
Unless Knudsen's. So what transfer fee do you reckon, having just been on TV in a World Cup second phase game, could Knudsen attract? Are we talking seven figures?
Oh, easily, I'd say. You can't expect him to be up sort of 2.5 to 3 million, somewhere in that range, because otherwise, what's the point of selling him? And he's obviously got a much bigger market to go to, because he's going to be willing to go to Germany or Poland or these sort of countries, because he's proven that he'll leave his country to go and play. So we're not just looking at a small market like we are sometimes with English players. We've got the English market and also the European market.
Interesting. Adam Flatt, any players whose futures currently hang in the balance? I think you said possibly Ward and Sears.
Yeah, I'd say so. Those two for me. I think Grant Ward could either have a really good season or just be bombed out. I don't think there's anything in the middle with him.
Seems to be a big wasted opportunity with Ward. I think there's a really good player there, and so I always bring up the Leeds game last season away when we played 4-4-2, and he's stretching the hell out of them, and you think, this guy if he actually gets some games, and he was the one guy that kind of spoke out against the previous manager, said, well, I don't really know whether I'm coming or going. I'm here one week, here the next week. I think the poor guy just needs some clear, simple instructions and a run of games, doesn't he?
Yeah, and I think he was probably the one player last year who could be the most upset with the previous manager with regards to not getting games when he deserved them. I say there were games where I know it's only the sponsors picking, but he's man of the match, and he wasn't supposed to be playing in that game because someone got injured on the day of the game, and he comes in as man of the match. Next game he's on the bench. Next game he comes in and does well. Next game he's on the bench, and he really seemed to be the easy casualty. I don't know why, but he was always a player that sort of always made way, which I didn't think was fair quite often last year. And I really hope he can get a good run out in one of those wide spots where he doesn't have to worry about defending. He can concentrate on trying to get into the box, trying to score goals. Because we've all seen he's got a good strike on him. He's got a great engine on him. He's fast. He works hard, and he can score goals. So hopefully he is the answer to one of our wing problems.
And one-on-one, he can accelerate. If you look at the assist he got for Waghorn's first goal against Millwall, against Championship defenders, he can, if he's given the chance and given the ball to his feet one-on-one, which obviously didn't happen very much last season. I think he can get past them. This is also Adam. Who do you think Paul Hurst was referring to when he said, but at the same time there are principles and basics that the players know we're after that weren't delivered today, and certainly going forward we won't accept?
Yeah, without seeing the game, it's difficult to know on that one. But
We're talking about passing to feet, are we?
I'd imagine passing to feet and wanting the ball at your feet and being comfortable to take it. It's very noticeable when Andre Dazelle plays, when Flynn Downs plays, when Tristan Iden play, that they want the ball and they're happy to take it. If they've got two men around them, they trust their touch, they trust their ability to get the ball and do something simple with it. I'm not talking about giving them the ball and expecting them to beat five men, but they'll get the ball, they'll take it, and they'll use it. And you watch the World Cup, you watch the top sides. The only way you cut through teams with passing is to be able to take the ball in uncomfortable positions and move it quickly into better positions. If you want to take a touch and you want to look inside, and you want to have a look round, and you won't ask for the ball unless you've got that, then you're not going to get anywhere playing pass in football. And quite often last year, when we did pass it a bit more, we didn't look threatening. We almost looked more a bigger threat to ourselves than we did the opposition, because we were worried about losing the ball and it would go along the back four for a bit, and then all of a sudden it would be hooked clear because we were under pressure. We were never putting them under pressure.
In the glorious game against Reading, the 4-0 at the end of last season, I remember sitting there thinking at half-time, the two players that aren't coping with this very well, it was Knudsen and Spence. I know Spence ended up got goal and an assist in that game, didn't he? He was in all the dream teams that week. But I remember thinking it was those two. Although I think you mentioned it earlier, I think in 4-2-3-1 land, nine times out of 10, the slightly more defensive inferior team, the fullbacks are the ones that get the most touches in these games, aren't they? In those systems. So I could possibly be wrong about that. This is Dennis. Which of the a similar question here? Which of the senior members of the squad should fear their place is most under threat? Skews jumps out at first glance, but where do you see Grant Ward fitting in? I think we've done that. Talk to me about Skews. He's, as Dave would say, he's fit as a butcher's dog. He's going to start 35 games next season, isn't he?
I'd imagine so. I'd be surprised if he didn't. I know there's always a talk of, I think people associate both Luke Chambers and Cole Skews as the proper blokes of the previous manager, but I think they're just good guys that are good in the dressing room and good enough at this level. I think Skews, the last few games of the season when Brian Klug was in charge with Gerard Nash, he looked a lot more, not of a threat, but he was happy to take the ball. He was happy to drive forward with the ball and get forward and pick it up, and showed he had a lot more to his game than the role that he'd obviously been instructed to play, which was to sit at the back and try and make interceptions and give the ball very simply. But it's just trying to bring out the best in him, because I think there is a better player than we've seen in there, and I think he's done a good enough job anyway for us.
I think he's going to have to recalibrate quite a lot, Skews. I remember at the the Forest game, Joe, the first one under Klug, I remember him just looking kind of a bit bewildered that he was getting the ball, giving it really quickly, short, and holding his position, and it was a bit of a sense of, well, you can have it back. Do you know what I mean? And I found him. I thought he was a bit befuddled by all of it, and he looked a bit. I don't know what I'm doing here for that first game, but I think you're right. He's smart enough and been a pro at this level long enough to probably. And it was a couple of games actually. I think Derby away and Cardiff away where he did. You talked about 4-1, 4-1. He had a lovely old time sitting on his own in front of the back four as well. So do you think we might see that?
Potentially, I think that's the role that suits him better. But Hurst may want someone a bit more athletic in there. If Shalabar could play that role, he may want him to play that in a similar way that to Ben Gibson did on loan from. Sorry, Ben Godfrey did on loan from Norwich last year, where he not only could sort of go sideline to sideline and cover that way, but he also, when he could get on the ball, could break the lines and run forward with it. So Skuse may be seen as one of the sort of higher players up.
You've just made a really good point that in Hurst's 4-2-3-1, it's not a deep line playmaker. The playmaker is the number 10, and you're right that Godfrey was sort of more box to box, and they wanted to. It was Naylor in Nolan. Nolan in the 10 position, that was the guy who was going to do the playmaking. Hopefully that'll be Andre as well. Tim, are you going to do that all season with Norwich Jack? I don't know what that means, Tim. We'll probably do a podcast with Norwich Jack, but I think you might have got some autocorrect there. Send me a DM, Tim, and I'll answer that one properly. But we will see Norwich Jack Reeves, wonderful Jack, probably before, but quite shortly actually, September the 2nd, the first game. ITFC Netherlands. Who do you guys think are going to be the victims of the new regime? I think everyone's interested in this. Are we going to see a lot less Chambo and Skuse? Well, talk to me about Chambers then. We've done Skuse.
Well, ultimately, we've only got one senior defender on the books at the moment. It's Luke Chambers. He's the captain. Even if they wanted to get rid of Chambers, they're not going to be able to. So we just have to hope that he buys into the new manager's thinking, which I think he will. By all accounts, he's a very good pro and a very good bloke, and I think he'll do fine for us. I think his ability on the ball improved by playing right back for those years where it looked a struggle from there, and I never particularly liked him in that role. But when he moved back to centre back, he's a lot more comfortable on it, probably because of that experience. So hopefully they find him a good partner to play alongside, and he carries on where he left off at the end of last season. And apart from not being injured, I mean, before that.
Every Championship team has a bruising centre half who kicks and clear, every single one, and most of the top appearance makers in the Championship were the burly centre half of that. So I think there's always a job for him there. I think he's going to be fine. Dan Greystone, is Jordan Rhodes on the shit list? Can I take this one, Joe?
Yes.
Jordan Rhodes before was kind of gazumped by Roy Keane, and Roy Keane would always take his place. But I think given his recent loan move and propensity to go, yeah, and open his eyes really widely, I think should we put Jordan Rhodes on the shit list, Joe? I think we should, don't you?
I think he has to be, really.
I think he does. He's definitely going to score, isn't he, at Portman Road?
Oh, I really hope not.
It'll be a horrible goal as well, won't it? It won't be like some superlative Klinsmann style header. It'll ricochet in off his thigh or something.
Yeah, I just don't understand the sort of reasoning Norwich have made that signing. Really, it doesn't seem the right player for their system, where they seem to create very few chances. When he's a player that doesn't really get involved in the game, it's just a finisher. They've done all this work to try and get their wage bill down, get all the high earners off it, and then by all accounts they're paying nearly the whole load of Jordan's 40 grand a week that he was on at Sheffield Wednesday. So it seems a baffling decision, but
I think they've looked,
works out terribly for them.
I think they've looked, and none of their forwards got above 10 goals last year, and they're like, oh, we need a proven forward. But you're right, if you're not creating any chances, or the one guy who was creating your chances has gone up the M1 and is at Leicester now, then,
Yep.
This is Harry. Do you guys share my love for Bartosz Białkowski? I don't know how much you love Bartosz, Harry, so I'm a fan. Joe?
Yeah, big fan. I was sort of discussing with people earlier whether he's the best goalkeeper to play for Ipswich Town earlier. So
is he better than Richard Wright?
Well, I think he's getting that way, isn't he? Richard Wright was obviously brilliant for a long period of time, but his second spell, he had one good season, struggled after that, and obviously he made he came through and was so young, so it's hard to judge his early performances against the sort of latter ones because he was still learning. But I think Bart has put together 3 Player of the Season campaigns. If he can put together another sort of 18 months of this quality of football, I think he's really going to be pushing him.
I think Graham Blackburn said that he had him up with Cooper as well. I can't speak on Cooper because I never saw him play, but I always think you can judge by the level that they played at, and obviously Cooper played at the highest level for the longest and won the most. So this is Peter Carr, Joe. Now that we've sorted out Bart's contract and signed a couple of wingers, which area of the pitch should Hurst look to strengthen? Yeah, I know you've mentioned. Give me one area. What's the most vital?
Centre back.
Centre back. This is Noel. Anyone got an uneasy feeling about the coming season? Signings so far a bit underwhelming, with the possible exception of Chalobah. Very poor first friendly. Oh, and I have a leak in my swimming pool. Noel, do you seriously have a swimming pool? If so, can you lend me a fiver? Can you understand someone having an uneasy feeling, Joe?
Yeah, I can do. When you look at the obviously we've heard a lot of positive things out of the club. Everyone's looking forward to the Paul Hurst reign, but ultimately you look at the squad that we've currently got in place, and it's very weak at the moment. It's very short. You look in every position, and like I said, I don't think like Knudsen is obviously a good player and an international, but if he goes, we've got sort of no good quality fullbacks. We've got one good quality centre back. Central midfield, we've got a lot of bodies, but how many of those are going to be able to stay fit? Out wide, we haven't really got anyone yet, but we've got a brilliant goalkeeper and a brilliant striker. But if anything happens to either of those two, and Paul Hurst struggles to adjust coming up to the Championship, and he can't get the players in that he thought he was going to get in, yeah, I could see how it could go the other way. But I'm positive and optimistic that it won't. But I can see why people are worrying with the season so close.
This is Tim. Has Paul Hurst's short range so far been more damned United than more than a manager? I think he's referring to Mr. Clough going into Leeds and telling them all that they weren't as good as they thought they were.
Yeah, I am. I don't think it's really been either yet. So
yeah, although it might be 44.
By any stretch of the imagination.
Might be 44 days. This is Luke. Are you concerned yet about the lack of players being bought in? Transfer window closes in just 3 weeks.
Yes. Sort of, to be brutally honest, Hurst said how he did all his business early at Shrewsbury last year and was sort of keen to get them on pre-season because he feels their fitness regime is tougher than any other clubs. He said they got boys in from Premier League clubs and they couldn't even keep up with it, and it took them. They almost had to give new signings a mini pre-season to get them going. If we're in that position, which it looks like we're starting to be, and then yeah, it's a struggle. How much of that is tied to Hurst being appointed late due to the playoff final? How much is it of him not being able to get deals done because him and Evans aren't meeting on valuations? But ultimately, we need to get these players in, and we need to get them in soon.
This is Graham. With the veil of doom and gloom removed after the previous management regime left the club, would supporters accept another mid-table finish, but with us playing a more entertaining modern style of football? # no hoofing. Similar position, but better football.
I think if any fan's going to be disappointed with that, then their expectations are very out of kilter with the club, because if we can finish 12th again and make progression on the football, then I think that's going to be a brilliant season. So I think like anything more than that is going to be unbelievable. So hopefully that is what happens.
Which chimes into the next question. James Gulks. Realistically, what are your predictions for the season? Final league position. I'm somewhere between winning the playoffs and second position at the moment. But seriously, do you think we can finish in the top half?
I think we can. Yeah, we finished there last year with missing all our sort of good quality central midfield players for the whole year. There's no reason why we can't. But ultimately, you can finish 11th or 14th and have a very similar season. So it doesn't really matter. I'd like to think we can sort of stay on the sort of coattails of the top 6, but I think that would be a big ask.
This is Barry. You've been called in by Hurst. He's seen / heard your pods and loves your work. So he asked you for your opinion on one must-buy player. Who would you suggest?
Do they have to be realistic?
Answer it however you want.
I'm just trying to have a think about it. I say just one of those sort of good ball playing centre halves.
I hate to say it, another good ball playing centre half for 800 grand would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Maybe see if Trevor can have a word with his brother and bring him down from Watford for 800,000.
Yeah. This is Mullet. How do the senior players react to Paul Hurst's praise of Neidham and Dazelle and contrasting criticism of them following Braintree? Does this promote an us and them? I think this goes back to the damned United question. An us and them to weed out more players like Webster who want out, or belie a manager punching up to assert his authority? Is he kind of pushing towards these young players? Do you see what Mullet's saying?
Yeah, I understand the point being made there that maybe Hurst is sort of seeing more in the youngsters than he is in the senior players at the moment with regards to the style that he wants to see, which wouldn't surprise you when you see how these players have played, how confident they are, how they are asked to play when they go away with England, that the senior players have realistically have had 5 years of sort of being told to play a style of football that they are now having their muscle memory that they need to sort out. Hurst obviously has a sort of difficult line to walk between getting them wanting to prove him wrong and pissing him off effectively. And hopefully it is he knows what he's doing. He's obviously a very smart manager who's got a lot of experience under his belt. But
Joe,
hasn't managed.
He's had quite quick impacts at his other clubs where he's gone, hasn't he?
Yep, but he also hasn't had to manage players earning £600,000-700,000 a year and who are comfortable, who probably have more power than the manager at certain points. But he's got to get them on side quickly. I don't think he's saying anything publicly that he wouldn't say privately, and I think the players seem a good bunch in that crowd. We've always heard they're a good bunch. That Luke Chambers leads that dressing room well, and I think that they'll take the comments in the spirit that it's intended and try and sort of come with him.
So Crawley tomorrow, Barnet, then Milton Keynes, then West Ham, and then we're back Blackburn on August the 4th. You know what it's like though. Season starts and you're like, oh, he's going to get him really fit. We're going to surprise everyone. Playoffs. Everyone's optimistic at the start of the season, aren't they?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Well, if you're not optimistic at this time of the year, then sort of being a football fan might not be for you. You can always look and try and be realistic and think, yeah, there are some areas where things look a bit dodgy, but then you always have that moment, yeah, but what if it really happens and really works? And hopefully that is the case. Hopefully Hurst gets them fit and gets them playing and works on it, and we hit the ground running at the start of the season.
Great stuff. Exactly like we did at the start of last season, but maybe with a bit more of a long-term outlook on it, let's just say. Joe, where can we find you on Twitter?
Just at Joe Fairs.
So follow Joe on Twitter. We've been chatting, all us podcasters, and I think we've virtually got everything figured out. So the plan next season, we're probably, and tell us what you think of this, we're probably going to go up to a 3-man team each podcast. Myself, Joe, Mikey, Dave, and Statman. So it won't always be just Dave and I. I hope that doesn't irritate anybody, but it's quite an undertaking every week, 3 shows a week. So we haven't bought in bodies, Joe. We've bought in quality, haven't we?
Yeah.
Like you were suggesting. So that's going to be the idea of the podcast. We've got some preview shows possibly coming up before the main start the week before August the 4th, and then I think this week in ITFC history is going to be starting at the back end of August. So by the time we get into September, we should be banging them out, 3 shows per week for you. But do give us your feedback on everything at Blue Monday ITFC. Follow Joe on Twitter at Joe Fairs, at David Diamond 3, at Mikey_Smith, at Chompex3. Follow all of these people at Ips Rich, Facebook, Twitter for us. And Joe, do you want to have the last word?
No.
Be careful what you wish for, as Mikey would say. What would Dave say? Crap. What would Stat say? Easy. We need to work on our catchphrases. And we will see you very soon. Goodbye, Joe.
Goodbye.